My name is Webb Nichols, and I've been running the overnight shift at WKDF 103.3 FN for 8 months now. The station sits in a converted recording studio on 16th Avenue South, right in the heart of Music Row, wedged between a publishing house and a rehearsal space where you can hear steel guitars bleeding through the walls at 3 in the morning. I took this job after my band fell apart. 5 years of playing dive bars on Broadway and sleeping on friends' couches in East Nashville had worn me down. The overnight DJ position paid enough for a studio apartment in Antioch and didn't require me to smile at tourists asking where they could find authentic honky-tonk. The building itself dates back to 1968, originally built as Soundcraft Studios where plenty of country legends cut their teeth. You can still see the old logo etched in the glass door facing the street. The station bought it in 1989, gutted most of the interior, but kept the basement isolation booth intact, supposedly for special recordings, though I'd never seen anyone use it. My shift runs midnight to 6 a.m. Most nights, I'm alone except for the pre-recorded segments and the occasional drunk calling in to request songs we stopped playing a decade ago. I eat gas station sandwiches from the Mapco on Demon Brune Street and watch the glow of the AT&T building through the booth window, counting down the hours until dawn breaks over Percy Warner Park. 3 weeks ago, something changed. I was queuing up a Zach Bryan track around 2:47 a.m. when I heard it. Another voice coming through my headphones. Not interference exactly. More like someone broadcasting on a frequency that didn't quite match ours. The signal felt close, intimate, like the person was in the next room. At first, I thought it was bleed over from another station. Nashville's airwaves are crowded with country, Christian rock, and pop stations, all fighting for bandwidth. But when I checked the frequency analyzer, it showed the phantom signal at 103.35 FM. That's not possible. FM stations are spaced 0.2 megahertz apart. There's no 103.35. The voice was male, singing, "I'm so lonesome I could cry" a cappella. No instruments, no production, just raw vocals that sounded like they'd been recorded at the bottom of a cistern. The tone quality was stunning. The kind of voice that would have made him a star in the 70s. All gravel and honey mixed together. But something about it felt wrong. The phrasing was too perfect, like he'd been practicing the same song for decades. And underneath the vocals, I could hear this faint mechanical hum, like old reel-to-reel tape spooling. The song ended. Silence. Then the voice spoke directly into my ears. "Can anybody hear me out there? I've been broadcasting for so long. I just want to go home." I ripped the headphones off and sat in the fluorescent glare of the booth, watching my reflection in the darkened window. The request line wasn't ringing. The voice had only been in my headphones. When I looked at the console, the recording light was on. I hadn't touched it. I didn't tell anyone about the voice at first. In the music industry, even the fringes of it, you learn to keep strange experiences to yourself. Nashville's full of people who claim to have seen Hank Williams' ghost at the Ryman or felt Patsy Cline's presence at the crash site in Camden. I wasn't going to be that guy. But the broadcasts kept happening. Every night around the same time, between 2:30 and 3:15 a.m., the phantom signal would appear. Always the same voice, singing classic country standards. Hank Snow, Lefty Frizzle, George Jones, songs my grandfather would have recognized. The singer never made mistakes, never took breaks, never varied his delivery. Just song after song, separated by that same plaintive question. Can anybody hear me out there? By the 5th night, I started taking notes. I wrote down every song, every timestamp, every detail I could remember about the signal quality. The voice had a Kentucky accent, I decided. Maybe Eastern Tennessee, the kind of drawl that smooths out consonants and stretches vowels like taffy. On Friday, I arrived for my shift to find Jimmy Briggs in the production room, rewiring something behind the mixing board. Jimmy's worked at the station since before it was a station. He'd been a junior engineer at Soundcraft Studios in the 70s and stayed on through every ownership change and format switch. He's 72 now, with hearing aids he refuses to admit he needs, and a wedding ring he still wears, even though his wife passed in 2019. "Jimmy," I said, leaning against the doorframe, "you ever hear weird stuff come through the signal? Like interference from other broadcasts?" He didn't look up from his work. "What kind of weird stuff?" "Someone singing. Old country songs. But not from any station I can identify." Jimmy's hand stopped moving. He set down his wire strippers and finally turned to look at me. His expression had changed. Not scared exactly, but careful. The way you'd look at a dog you weren't sure would bite. "What frequency?" he asked. 103.35. That's not a frequency." "I know." He studied me for a long moment, then reached up and adjusted his hearing aids, the first time I'd ever seen him acknowledge them. "You been spending time near the basement door?" "No, why would I?" "Because you're the third person who's heard that voice, and all of them spent time near that door." He stood up, joints creaking. "Come on, I'll show you something." We took the stairs down to the basement. I'd been down here before to grab supplies from storage, but I'd never paid much attention to the layout. The main corridor had 3 doors: storage on the left, electrical room on the right, and at the far end, a heavy steel door with a faded sign that read, "Isolation booth, do not enter during recording." Jimmy stopped about 10 feet from the door. That booth was built in 1968, soundproof, climate-controlled, best recording space in Nashville at the time. He paused. In 1974, a singer named Johnny Vance booked 3 days of studio time. He was convinced he'd be the next big thing. Had that raw talent, you know, the kind that makes your chest hurt when you hear it. What happened to him? Every label passed. They said his sound was too traditional, too rooted in the past. This was during the countrypolitan era. Producers wanted strings and pop crossover, not honky-tonk purity. Jimmy's voice had gotten quieter. Johnny took it hard, real hard. Last night of his session, he locked himself in that booth and hung himself from the ceiling beam. Used a microphone cable. Jesus. They didn't find him for 3 days. Booth was supposed to be empty, and it's soundproof, so he trailed off. Before he did it, he wrote something on the wall in there. "If they won't listen to me alive, they'll have to hear me dead." We stood in silence, staring at the door. The station sealed it up after that. Jimmy continued. "But the booth itself is still intact. All the old equipment, the microphone, everything. Just sitting there, in the dark." "Have you heard the voice?" I asked. "Once, in 1997. I was working late, walked past this door, and I heard someone singing, 'Your Cheatin' Heart.' Clear as day, coming from inside." He turned to look at me. "I put in for 2 weeks vacation the next morning and didn't come back here alone after dark for 3 years. Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because in this industry, Webb, you either believe in ghosts or you don't. And the people who do believe don't want to talk about it." He started walking back toward the stairs. "My advice? Don't go near that door. Don't listen too close to the signal. And whatever you do, don't try to answer back." Jimmy's warning should have been enough. Should have made me avoid the basement entirely, keep my head down, finish my shifts, and collect my paycheck. But curiosity is a disease in this business. Every musician who ever came to Nashville caught it. The need to know, to understand, to get closer to something mysterious and beautiful, even when it might destroy you. Tuesday night, the Phantom broadcast came through stronger than ever. I was playing a Morgan Wallen track when the signal bled through so loud, I thought someone had hijacked our frequency. The voice sang Long Black Veil, each note perfect and aching. When the song ended, there was a longer pause than usual. Then, I know you can hear me, Webb. I've been calling out for so long. Someone finally tuned in. He'd said my name. My hands went numb. The request line started ringing. Probably someone calling about the dead air. But I couldn't move. The voice continued. Come find me. Down where the sound lives. Down where they left me. The signal cut out. My show's audio returned to normal. The ringing phone sounded distant, like it was coming from another building. I grabbed my cell and checked the time. 2:47 a.m. Same as always. I should have gone home. Instead, at 4:15 a.m., when the pre-recorded Sunday service programming kicked in, I went downstairs. The basement felt different at night. During the day, it's just a storage area, with concrete floors and exposed pipes. But at 4 in the morning, the shadows gathered in corners like they were holding meetings. The overhead bulbs created more darkness than light, throwing everything into sharp relief. I walked down the corridor toward the isolation booth. My footsteps echoed off the concrete. Somewhere above me, a pipe rattled. I could hear the building settling. Or maybe it was the traffic starting to pick up on West End Avenue as the early commuters headed toward Vanderbilt. The steel door to the booth stood at the end of the hallway, untouched for decades, according to Jimmy. But when I got close, I noticed something I had missed before. Fresh scratches around the doorknob, like someone had been trying to pick the lock. And underneath the old warning sign, someone had taped a piece of paper. I pulled it down. The paper was yellowed, the tape brittle. The text was typewritten, the kind you'd see from a 1970s IBM Selectric. Rules for working at Soundcraft Studios, revised 1974. If you hear singing from the isolation booth after midnight, do not investigate. The booth should be empty. Never record in the isolation booth alone. Always maintain a 2-person minimum. If equipment turns on by itself, leave it running. Do not attempt to power down the booth remotely. Do not respond to voices calling your name from inside sealed rooms. If you find the isolation booth door unlocked, do not enter. Call the senior engineer immediately. All recordings made after Johnny Vance's death must be erased without listening. Mark the tapes corrupted and store them in the vault. The paper shook in my hands. Someone had updated these rules after Johnny died. Someone had known this would keep happening. I pressed my ear against the door. At first, nothing. Just the dead silence of soundproofing. The kind that makes your ears ring because they're not used to the absence of ambient noise. Then, faint as breathing, I heard it. Someone singing inside. The same voice from the broadcasts, but clearer now, unfiltered by radio waves. He was singing, "I'm so lonesome I could cry." And the sound quality was pristine, like he was standing 6 inches away from a studio microphone. My hand moved to the doorknob before I realized what I was doing. It turned. The door swung open on hinges that should have been rusted shut. A wave of cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of old cigarettes and that particular mustiness of vintage recording equipment. The isolation booth was maybe 10 by 12 feet. The walls covered in acoustic foam that had yellowed to the color of old teeth. In the center stood a microphone on a boom stand, and behind it, a small control panel with VU meters that glowed faintly green. The equipment was on, running, recording. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a pneumatic hiss, and the world went silent. My ears popped from the pressure change. The acoustic foam absorbed everything. My breathing, my footsteps, even the sound of my jacket rustling. It felt like being underwater or wrapped in cotton. The microphone stood at the center of the room, aimed at nothing. A red light glowed on its base, indicating it was live. Behind the control panel, I could see a reel-to-reel machine slowly turning, recording silence. Or maybe not silence. Maybe something I couldn't hear yet. On the far wall, I found Johnny's message. Someone had tried to paint over it, but the words had bled through the layers. If they won't listen to me alive, they'll have to hear me dead. The control panel had a small monitor, the old CRT kind from the 80s. It was displaying a waveform, active audio, peaks and valleys scrolling across the screen. But I couldn't hear anything. The booth was silent. I moved closer to the microphone. As I approached, the green VU meters started bouncing, responding to something. The reel-to-reel spun faster. The waveform on the monitor spiked. Then I heard it. My own voice coming from the speakers mounted in the corners of the booth. But I wasn't speaking. The voice was singing lovesick blues, and it sounded like me, but wrong. Like someone had learned to imitate my vocal patterns, but didn't understand the emotion behind the words. The recording timestamp on the monitor read, Tuesday, 3 a.m. Today was Tuesday. It was now 4:23 a.m. The voice kept singing. My voice. The red recording light pulsed in time with the words. I reached for the microphone to shut it off, and the moment my fingers touched the metal, the singing stopped. The booth went silent again. The VU meters dropped to 0. A new file appeared on the monitor. web_nichols_final_session.wev. The timestamp changed. Wednesday, 3 a.m. Tomorrow night. I yanked my hand back and stumbled toward the door. It wouldn't open. I pushed, pulled, threw my shoulder against it. The acoustic foam seemed to press closer, muffling my panic. The air tasted stale, recycled, like breathing from a paper bag. The microphone clicked on by itself. The red light brightened. And from the speakers, I heard Johnny's voice for the first time without the radio filter. Thank you for letting me out, Webb. Thank you for taking my place. The door opened. I fell into the hallway, gasping, and scrambled away from the booth. Behind me, I heard the microphone click off. The door closed with that same pneumatic hiss. When I looked back, the door was sealed tight again. But through the gap at the bottom, I could see light. That faint green glow from the VU meters, still bouncing, still recording something in the dark. If you like the stories, please hype the videos from a button like this just above the comment section. It helps the videos to get more reach and perform well. It would take just a few seconds and cost nothing, but would help the channel grow even faster. Thank you. I called in sick Wednesday, told the station manager I had food poisoning from the hot chicken at Hattie B's. He didn't question it. Half the transplants who move here end up in the ER after trying to prove they can handle the heat. I spent the day in my apartment in Antioch, curtains drawn, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. The recording with my voice, the timestamp, Johnny's message. Maybe I'd been working too many overnight shifts. Maybe the isolation and the weird hours were getting to me. But when I checked my phone, I found a voicemail from the station, left at 3 a.m. that morning, according to the timestamp. I didn't remember my phone ringing. I played it. Static. Then my voice singing, "Your Cheatin' Heart." The recording quality was pristine, studio grade. Each word articulated perfectly, every note in tune. I sounded like I'd been practicing for years, but I'd never sung that song in my life. I don't even particularly like Hank Williams. The song ended. Then my voice spoke. This is Webb Nichols, broadcasting from 103.35 FM. If you're hearing this, you're listening to the only real country station in Nashville. The only one that matters. The only one that's going to make me famous. The voicemail ended. I sat on my couch for 20 minutes, staring at my phone. Then I opened my laptop and started researching Johnny Vance. There wasn't much online. A few mentions in Nashville music history blogs, a grainy photo from a 1973 performance at the Exit Inn, an obituary from the Tennessean dated March 17, 1974. The obituary was brief. John Michael Vance, 28, aspiring country singer, found dead at Soundcraft Studios. Death ruled a suicide. Survived by his mother, Eleanor Vance of Bowling Green, Kentucky. I found a digitized copy of a music magazine from 1974 that mentioned him. The article was about the changing Nashville sound, how traditional country was dying out in favor of pop crossover. Johnny was quoted, "They want us to sound like we're from Los Angeles, but I'm from Kentucky. I sing about coal mines and tobacco fields and losing the woman you love. That's country music. That's all it should ever be." 2 months after that article was published, he was dead. I kept digging. Found a thread on a local history forum from 2016 where someone asked about haunted locations in Nashville. A user named Nashville Native 72 had written, "I worked at Soundcraft Studios in the 70s. After Johnny Vance died, engineers started reporting equipment turning on by itself. Microphones going live, recordings appearing on tapes that should have been blank. The studio tried to keep it quiet, but everyone knew. That's why they sold the building in 1989. Nobody wanted to work there anymore." Another user had responded, "My uncle was a session musician who recorded at Soundcraft in 76. He said if you were in the building after midnight, you'd hear someone singing in the isolation booth. Always the same songs, always the same voice. He quit after he found a tape labeled with his name that he'd never recorded." I closed my laptop and checked the time. 2:15 p.m. My shift started in less than 10 hours. I should have quit right then. Should have sent an email to the station manager saying I was done, moving back to whatever small town I'd come from, giving up on Nashville entirely. But that disease I mentioned, curiosity, it had its hooks in me now. I needed to understand what was happening. Needed to know if Johnny was really still broadcasting, or if something else was going on. At 11:45 p.m., I drove to the station. Music Row was quiet this time of night. Most of the buildings dark except for security lights. I parked on 17th Avenue and walked to the building. The street was empty, except for a homeless man sleeping in the doorway of the publishing house next door. Inside, the station felt wrong. The air was heavier somehow, like humidity had built up in the walls. I took the elevator to the second floor and entered the broadcast booth. Everything looked normal. The mixing board, the microphone, the window overlooking the street. But there was a smell I hadn't noticed before. Something chemical and slightly sweet, like paint thinner mixed with rotten fruit. I sat down and started my shift, played the regular rotation, read the weather report, took a few calls from insomniacs and long-haul truckers passing through on I-40, normal overnight radio. At 2:30 a.m., the phantom signal started. This time it was different, stronger. The voice didn't bleed through gradually. It just appeared, cutting off the Luke Combs song I'd been playing. My voice came through the speakers, singing "I Walk the Line." Perfect pitch, perfect phrasing. But with that same hollow quality, like the emotion had been scraped out. Then the voice spoke directly to me again. "You should come down here, Webb. We're broadcasting together now. We're going to be so famous. Everyone's going to hear us." The signal cut. My show's audio returned. I sat frozen, watching the frequency analyzer. It showed no unusual activity. According to the equipment, that broadcast had never happened. But I'd heard it, and so had someone else. The request line was ringing. I answered, "WKDF, you're on the air." "Did you hear that?" A woman's voice, urgent. "That song. That wasn't part of your regular programming, was it?" "What did you hear?" "A man singing Johnny Cash, but it sounded wrong, like someone imitating him, and then he said something about broadcasting together. Are you doing some kind of special segment?" "Where are you calling from?" "I'm driving north on Highway 65, just past the Trinity Lane exit. I've been listening to your station for the past hour. That's the first weird thing I've heard." "Did you catch the singer's name?" "He said his name was Johnny. Said this was 103.35 FM. She paused. "But your station is 103.3, right?" "Right. So what's 103.35? "There is no 103.35. She hung up. The line went dead. I sat in the booth watching the phone's display screen. The incoming call had shown up as unknown number. But underneath it, in smaller text, it said, "Location, basement extension." We didn't have phones in the basement. I pulled up the station's directory on the computer, found the extension list. Extension 247 was labeled Isolation Booth, Decommissioned 1989. The phone rang again. Extension 247. The caller IB displayed my own name. I didn't answer, let it ring. After 15 rings, it stopped. Seconds later, a new voicemail notification appeared on the phone system. I played it on speaker. My voice. "Webb, why won't you answer?" "I'm down here waiting. I've been practicing your songs, learning your voice. You're going to help me finish what I started. They'll listen to us. They have to listen to us." The background noise on the recording wasn't right. There was that same chemical smell I'd noticed when I came in, but stronger now. And underneath the voice, I could hear something mechanical. Not music equipment, but something industrial. A compressor, maybe, or a ventilation system running. I checked the building schematics posted by the fire extinguisher. The ventilation system for the isolation booth ran through the basement, connected to an old HVAC unit installed in 1968. According to the diagram, the system had a separate circuit from the rest of the building. That's when I noticed the detail I'd missed before, a red stamp across the basement section of the schematic that read, "Inspection required, 1989. Next to it, someone had written in pen, "Deferred, budget constraints." The booth had been sealed in 1989, the same year they'd stopped maintaining its ventilation system. 34 years ago. The phone rang again. Extension 247. This time I answered. Silence. Then heavy breathing, slow and labored. Not ghostly or supernatural, human. The sound of someone struggling to get enough oxygen. "Johnny?" I said. The breathing stopped. My own voice came through the receiver, thick and slurred. "Come down here, Webb. Please. I can't breathe right. Something's wrong with the air. I need help." The line went dead. I was already moving toward the stairs. The basement stairs felt longer than I remembered. Each step down made my head swim a little more, like descending into water. The chemical smell was stronger here. Not just paint thinner anymore, but something sharper, acidic. It burned the back of my throat. The corridor lights flickered as I approached. Not the dramatic horror movie flicker, just the weak, inconsistent pulse of old fluorescent tubes that needed replacing. They cast the hallway in alternating brightness and shadow, making the door at the end seem to pulse like it was breathing. I stopped about 15 feet from the isolation booth. The rules Jimmy had shown me played through my head. If you find the isolation booth door unlocked, do not enter. Call the senior engineer immediately. The door stood open, just a crack, maybe 6 inches. Light leaked out. That green glow from the VU meters I'd seen before. And I could hear something now, even from here. The slow turn of a reel-to-reel machine, tape spooling from one wheel to the other. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Text message from an unknown number. I'm recording your best performance yet. Come listen. I took another step forward. The smell got worse. My eyes started watering. I pulled my shirt up over my nose and mouth, but it didn't help much. The air down here felt thick, viscous, like breathing through wet cotton. Another step. The hallway tilted slightly to the left. I put my hand against the wall to steady myself. The concrete felt warm under my palm, almost feverish. That wasn't right. Basements should be cool. Webb? A voice from inside the booth. Mine, but rougher. Is that you out there? I've been waiting. I've got something to show you. I reached the doorway and looked inside. The booth looked different than it had 2 nights ago. The acoustic foam on the walls had darkened, water-stained or maybe mold-stained. The microphone stood in the center, but now there were 3 more positioned around it in a triangle pattern. All of them live, red lights glowing. The reel-to-reel machine spun slowly, recording onto a tape that looked ancient, brown and brittle, like it should have disintegrated years ago. The control panel showed multiple tracks recording simultaneously. 4 waveforms, all active. But the booth was empty. I stepped inside. The door didn't close behind me this time, just stayed open to the hallway. The pressure in my ears intensified, like driving up a mountain. My head felt light, disconnected from my body. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, too fast and irregular. The monitor on the control panel displayed a file directory. Dozens of recordings, all dated within the past 3 weeks. All labeled with my name and different timestamps. I clicked on one from 5 days ago. Webb Nichols 3:15 a.m.wav. The speakers played it back, my voice singing Folsom Prison Blues. I'd never recorded this, never even hummed it. But there it was, my voice, my tone, singing with the kind of precision that comes from hours of practice. I clicked another file. Webb Nichols 2:47 a.m.wav from last Tuesday. This one was worse. Me singing, He Stopped Loving Her Today, the George Jones classic. But partway through, my voice started to slur, words blending together. By the end, I was struggling to breathe between phrases. The recording ended with a sound like someone gasping for air. The reel-to-reel machine clicked, stopped recording. The tape had reached the end of its spool. In the silence that followed, I heard something new. A low mechanical hum coming from the vent in the corner of the booth. The HVAC system, still running after all these years. I walked over to the vent. The metal grate was caked with dust and something else. A brown, oily residue. When I touched it, my fingers came away sticky. The smell was strongest here, pouring out of the vent with each cycle of the system. My phone buzzed again. Another text. Check the tape. The one they never found. I turned back to the reel-to-reel machine. Next to it, on a shelf I hadn't noticed before, sat a small cardboard box. The label read, Vance J., March 1974, do not erase. I opened it. Inside was a single tape reel, the tape wound tight. A piece of paper was tucked underneath, folded and yellowed. I pulled it out and unfolded it. A letter, handwritten in shaky cursive. To whoever finds this. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. I've been recording down here for 3 days straight, trying to get one perfect demo to send to RCA. But something's wrong with this room. The air tastes wrong. Makes my head feel like it's full of cotton. I keep forgetting things. Forgetting where I am. Sometimes I start singing and don't remember starting. Last night I recorded 6 hours straight, and when I played it back, it sounded like someone else singing with my voice. Someone who knew all the words better than I did. Someone who'd been practicing these songs longer than I've been alive. The engineer said the ventilation system is broken, but they can't afford to fix it yet. Said I should take breaks, go outside for fresh air, but I can't stop now. I'm so close. I can feel it. One more perfect take, and they'll have to listen to me. If I don't make it out of here, tell my mama I tried. Tell her I died singing, which is all I ever wanted to do anyway. Johnny Vance, March 14th, 1974. The paper slipped from my fingers. March 14th. 3 days before they found him. He hadn't just killed himself in despair. He'd been poisoned, slowly. The ventilation system had been broken, and he'd spent 3 days breathing whatever was leaking into this booth. I looked at the vent again, still running, still pumping that sweet, chemical-smelling air into the booth. How long had I been down here? 5 minutes? 10? My watch face blurred when I tried to focus on it. The recordings. My voice on all those files. I hadn't made them. I'd been making them. Coming down here in the middle of the night, not remembering, singing into the microphones while the broken HVAC system slowly poisoned me. Just like Johnny. Coming down here night after night, losing time, losing memory, recording songs I didn't remember learning. The phantom broadcasts weren't ghosts. They were me, broadcasting from down here, my oxygen-starved brain producing perfect performances while my conscious mind was upstairs thinking I was running my show. I stumbled toward the door. The hallway swam in front of me. I could hear my own voice now, coming from inside the booth behind me. Not from the speakers, from my own throat. I was singing, "I'm so lonesome I could cry," and I didn't remember starting. My legs gave out halfway down the corridor. I hit the concrete, the impact barely registering. The ceiling tiles above me started to blur and multiply. 4 tiles became 8, became 16. I tried to push myself up, but my arms weren't responding right. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Heavy boots. Someone grabbed me under the arms and dragged me toward the stairs. I tried to see who it was, but my vision had narrowed to a tunnel. I could smell fresh air now, real air, mixing with the chemical sweetness that clung to my clothes. "Stay with me, son." Jimmy's voice, rough with panic. "How long were you down there?" I tried to answer but couldn't form words. My tongue felt thick and useless. The world went gray at the edges. The last thing I heard before losing consciousness was Jimmy on his phone. "I need an ambulance at 16 Music Square West. Carbon monoxide exposure." Yes, he's breathing. Barely. Then darkness. I woke up in Vanderbilt University Medical Center with an oxygen mask strapped to my face and an IV line in my left arm. The room was too bright, all white walls and fluorescent lights. A monitor beside the bed beeped steadily, tracking my heart rate. Through the window, I could see the sun rising over Nashville, painting the sky orange and pink. A doctor came in around 7 a.m., Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, according to her badge. She was maybe 40, with reading glasses perched on top of her head, and the kind of efficient manner that suggested she'd been working all night. "Welcome back. she said, checking the monitor. "You gave your friend quite a scare." Carbon monoxide levels were at 28% when you came in. Another 20 minutes in that basement, and we'd be having a very different conversation. I pulled the oxygen mask down. How long was I out? About 5 hours. We've been running hyperbaric oxygen therapy to flush the CO out of your system. She pulled up a chair. The paramedics said you were found in a basement with a malfunctioning HVAC system. How long had you been down there? I don't know. 10 minutes, maybe 15. And before last night? Had you spent time in that area previously? I thought about the recordings. My voice on those files. Singing songs I didn't remember learning. The blackouts. The lost time. I think so, but I don't remember. She nodded like she'd expected that answer. Carbon monoxide poisoning causes memory loss, especially with repeated exposure. It binds to hemoglobin more efficiently than oxygen, starving your brain and organs. Symptoms include headaches, dizziness, confusion, and in severe cases, hallucinations and memory blackouts. She paused. You're lucky your friend found you when he did. What about long-term effects? With proper treatment, most people recover fully. But you'll need to avoid any further exposure. That building needs to be evacuated and inspected immediately. Jimmy arrived at 9 a.m. with a change of clothes and a bag of biscuits from Biscuit Love on 11th Avenue. He looked like he hadn't slept, his face drawn and pale under the harsh hospital lighting. "Doc says you're going to be fine," he said, settling into the chair beside my bed. "Thank God I decided to check on you." "Why did you come to the station?" "Because I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about you, about what I'd told you about Johnny." He rubbed his face. "I knew you'd go looking. Knew you'd end up in that booth. Same curiosity that got Johnny killed." "It wasn't suicide," I said. "He was poisoned. The ventilation system." "I know. I figured that out years ago, but I could never prove it. The studio covered it up, blamed it on mental health issues, sealed the booth, and pretended the problem didn't exist." He opened the bag of biscuits but didn't eat, just stared at them. I should have fought harder. Should have made them inspect the system properly. "You didn't know for sure." "I knew enough." He looked at me. "After they took you to the hospital, I called the fire marshal. Got them to do an emergency inspection of the building. You want to know what they found?" I nodded. The HVAC system for that booth has been leaking carbon monoxide since 1968. The original installation used a gas-powered compressor with a cracked heat exchanger. Every time the system runs, it pumps CO into the booth. The studio knew about it in 1974. There are work orders in the files requesting repairs, but they never fixed it, just sealed the booth and figured that was good enough. But the booth kept running, the equipment, the recordings. The electrical system was on a separate circuit. Equipment could still turn on, still record, even with the door sealed. And that vent in the corner, still connected to the main system. Anyone who spent time near that door, anyone who went inside, they'd be breathing poison. I thought about all those nights I'd walked past the door, the times I'd pressed my ear against it, listening. The strange smell I'd noticed in the hallways. How many people? Fire marshal found records of 3 other employees reporting similar symptoms over the years. Headaches, dizziness, memory loss. 2 of them quit. One of them, a technician named Dale Whitmore, died in a car accident in 1998. Single vehicle collision on I-24, drove straight into a concrete barrier. Coroner ruled it driver error, but looking back, he trailed off. We'll never know how many people that booth poisoned. The guilt settled over me like a weight. The recordings on the computer. My voice singing those songs. I don't remember any of it. The doctor said CO poisoning can cause something called confabulation. Your brain fills in gaps in memory with false information, creates entire experiences that never happened. You probably did go down to that booth multiple times, but your conscious mind wasn't recording the memories properly. So Johnny's voice, the phantom broadcasts, all of it was me. Jimmy was quiet for a long moment. The fire marshal found something else. In the booth, behind the acoustic foam, someone had written more messages, not just Johnny's. There were dozens of them, dating back to 1968. Engineers, musicians, technicians, all describing the same symptoms. The hallucinations, the lost time, the feeling that someone else was using their voice. Who wrote them? We don't know. Most of them were unsigned, but one of them was dated March 16th, 1974, the day before they found Johnny. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. Writing on the wall behind the foam, exposed now that the fire marshal had torn the booth apart. I can hear everyone who came before me, all their voices singing through mine. The booth remembers. The booth records everything. My skin prickled. That's not possible. CO poisoning affects everyone differently. Some people get paranoid, some get euphoric, some start experiencing audio hallucinations. If multiple people over decades were all breathing the same poison in the same small space, their brains might produce similar hallucinations, pattern recognition breaking down, memory mixing with imagination. He put his phone away. Or maybe there's something about that booth we don't understand. Maybe carbon monoxide does something to the way sound records in that space. I don't know. I'm an engineer, not a scientist. A nurse came in to check my vitals, and we fell silent. After she left, I asked the question I've been avoiding. What happens now? The building's been evacuated. City inspectors are going through every system, every vent, checking for other leaks. The isolation booth is being dismantled. They're treating it as a health hazard and possibly a crime scene. He finally took a biscuit from the bag and broke it in half. Station manager wants to know if you're planning to sue. I told him you're just focused on recovery right now. Are there any recordings left? The tapes, the digital files. Fire marshals seized everything as evidence. They want to analyze them, see if they can determine how many people recorded down there while impaired. He paused. Why? You want to hear them? I thought about my voice singing those old country songs. The perfection of the performances. The emotion that seemed scraped out. No, I don't think I do. Dr. Okonkwo returned at noon to check on me. She authorized my discharge with strict instructions. No strenuous activity for 3 days. Follow-up appointments scheduled for next week. And under no circumstances was I to return to that building until it was certified safe. Jimmy drove me back to my apartment. We didn't talk much during the ride down I-40. The Nashville skyline looked different in daylight. Familiar but somehow distant, like a postcard of a city I used to know. At a red light on Murfreesboro Pike, Jimmy said, "I've been thinking about something." In 1974, when Johnny locked himself in that booth, he knew the ventilation was broken. There were memos, complaints, work orders. He knew, and he went in anyway. Because he thought it was worth the risk for one perfect demo, or because the CO had already affected his judgment, made him think clearly, made him believe things that weren't true. The light changed and we drove on. That's the worst part about poison like this. It doesn't just hurt you physically. It gets inside your head, changes how you think, makes you do things you'd never normally do. He parked outside my apartment complex. Before I got out, He reached into the back seat and pulled out a cardboard box. "Found this in your locker at the station. Thought you might want it." Inside was my notebook, the one where I'd been tracking the phantom broadcasts. Pages of timestamps, song titles, descriptions of Johnny's voice. My handwriting got shakier as the entries progressed, harder to read, like I'd been writing while my hands trembled. The last entry was from 2 nights ago. He knows my name now. He wants me to come down. I think I'm going to go. I'd written that and then forgotten writing it. Walked down to the basement like a sleepwalker, breathing poison, recording songs I'd never remember learning. "Keep it," Jimmy said. Reminder of what happens when we ignore warning signs. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice, my voice, singing in the dark. I got up around 3 a.m. and opened my laptop, searching for more information about carbon monoxide poisoning and auditory hallucinations. I found a medical journal article about a case in Ohio where an entire office building was contaminated by a faulty heating system. Employees reported hearing voices, seeing figures that weren't there, experiencing shared hallucinations. The researchers concluded that CO poisoning could create a kind of suggestive state where people's expectations shape their perceptions. If you expected to hear a ghost, you'd hear a ghost. If you expected to lose time, you'd lose time. The poison made you believe whatever you feared most. I closed the laptop and sat in my dark apartment, listening to the sound of traffic on the street below. Somewhere in Nashville, in a sealed-off basement booth, recording equipment sat silent for the first time in decades. No more tape spooling. No more microphones clicking on by themselves. No more voices singing in the dark. Just silence and the slow dissipation of poison that had been accumulating for over 50 years. The story broke 3 days later. The Tennessean ran it on page 3. Historic Music Row building evacuated after decades-old carbon monoxide leak discovered. They'd interviewed the fire marshal, the station manager, and a representative from the Metro Public Health Department. My name wasn't mentioned, but anyone who worked at the station knew who'd been found in that basement. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Co-workers checking in, asking if I was all right. The station manager calling to discuss workers' compensation. A lawyer from some firm downtown wanting to know if I'd considered litigation. I ignored most of them, but I answered when I saw Jimmy's number. "You see the article?" he asked. "Yeah. They're doing a full environmental assessment of the building. Found elevated CO levels in the main broadcast booth too, not just the basement. Lower levels, but enough to cause headaches and fatigue over time." He sighed. They're estimating the booth has been leaking since the original installation. 57 years of poison seeping through that building. How many people worked there over the years? Hundreds, maybe more. Station manager's been going through employment records trying to contact former employees. Some of them reported health issues while working there. Migraines, dizziness, depression. Nobody connected it to the building. I thought about Johnny Vance, locked in that booth for 3 days, breathing concentrated poison while he chased his dream. About Dale Whitmore driving into a concrete barrier. About all the other people whose names we'd never know, who walked past that door and breathed in just enough to change them. "They found something else," Jimmy said quietly, "in the archived tapes. There's a recording from 1968, from the booth's first week of operation. It's a test recording, just someone checking levels. At the end, the engineer says his head feels fuzzy, like he's been drinking. Says the air in the booth tastes sweet. That was the CO. Yeah, the problem existed from day one. Whoever installed that system screwed up the ventilation from the start, and everyone who came after just kept ignoring the signs. He paused. I'm meeting with a lawyer tomorrow. Not to sue, just to make sure there's a record. Make sure this gets documented properly so it can't happen again. Good. You should think about talking to someone too. Not a lawyer, a therapist. What you went through, the memory loss, the hallucinations, that's trauma. Doesn't matter if it was chemically induced. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and stared at the wall. My apartment felt too small, too quiet. I kept expecting to hear that voice, my voice, singing from somewhere I couldn't see. Even though I knew it had been the poison, even though I understood the science behind it, part of my brain still insisted I'd heard something real. The doorbell rang around 6 p.m. I checked the peephole and saw a woman I didn't recognize, maybe 50, wearing a cardigan despite the Nashville heat, holding a casserole dish covered in aluminum foil. I opened the door. Can I help you? Are you Webb Nichols? The DJ from the radio station? Yeah. My name is Eleanor Vance Patterson. I'm Johnny Vance's niece. She lifted the casserole dish slightly. I know this is strange, but I wanted to thank you. May I come in? I let her in, too surprised to think of a reason to refuse. She set the casserole on my kitchen counter and turned to face me. She had her uncle's eyes, that same dark brown, almost black in certain light. I grew up hearing stories about Uncle Johnny, she said. My mother, his sister, always said he'd been sick with depression, that the music industry had broken him. But I never believed it. I was only 7 when he died, but I remember him being happy, excited. He'd come visit us in Bowling Green and talk about his music for hours. That wasn't a man who wanted to die. I pulled out a chair at my small dining table. She sat down, and I took the seat across from her. When I saw the article in the paper, everything clicked. She continued. The headaches he complained about during those recording sessions. The way he'd forget conversations we'd had. My mother said he started acting strange in the weeks before he died, more focused, almost manic about his music. I thought it was just ambition. It was the carbon monoxide. It affects judgment. Makes people fixated on ideas that don't make sense to anyone else. Did he suffer? At the end? I thought about Johnny's letter, the one I'd found in the booth. The shaky handwriting, the confusion, the determination to record one more perfect take. I think he was too far gone to understand what was happening. The poison makes everything foggy. He probably just felt tired. She nodded, pulling a tissue from her purse. For 50 years, my family believed he killed himself because he wasn't good enough. Because Nashville rejected him and he couldn't handle it. My mother carried that guilt until she died, wondering if she'd said something wrong, if she could have helped him somehow. It wasn't suicide. Not really. He was poisoned. The studio knew the system was broken and didn't fix it. I know. And that's why I wanted to thank you. Because you proved it. My uncle's death wasn't his fault. He didn't give up. He didn't choose to leave us. He was killed by a company that valued money over safety. She wiped her eyes. I'm working with a lawyer to have his death certificate amended. Remove the suicide designation. Get him buried with the honor he deserved. After she left, I stood in my apartment, holding her casserole and trying to process what had just happened. I'd gone to work at a radio station expecting to play music and collect a paycheck. Instead, I'd nearly died in a basement booth and accidentally solved a 50-year-old mystery. My phone buzzed. Text from Jimmy. City's ordering a full demolition of the basement level. Isolation booth will be destroyed. Thought you'd want to know. I texted back. Good. The next day, I drove to the station. Not to work. I was still on medical leave, but to see it one more time before they tore it apart. Yellow caution tape crisscrossed the entrance. A sign on the door read, "Building closed, environmental hazard, no entry." I stood on the sidewalk across 16th Avenue, watching workers in hazmat suits carry equipment out of the building. They'd set up a decontamination tent in the parking lot where Music City Bar BQ used to be. Everything that came out of that building had to be tested and cleaned before it could be used again. A news van from Channel 4 pulled up. A reporter I recognized from the morning news got out and started filming a segment in front of the building. I heard fragments of her report. Decades of exposure, health department investigating, former employees encouraged to seek medical evaluation. This was going to be bigger than I'd realized. The story would spread beyond Nashville, become a cautionary tale about old buildings and deferred maintenance. Johnny Vance's name would be attached to carbon monoxide safety regulations. His death would finally mean something. I walked down to Centennial Park and sat on a bench near the Parthenon. Tourists took photos of the replica Greek temple, laughing and posing, completely unaware of the drama unfolding a mile away on Music Row. The sun felt good on my face. The air tasted clean. My phone rang. The station manager. "Webb, I wanted to update you on the situation. We're relocating operations to a temporary facility in Berry Hill while the building undergoes remediation. The environmental team estimates it'll take at least 6 months to fully decontaminate and rebuild the ventilation systems. Okay, I also wanted to talk about your position. Obviously, you're cleared for return when you're medically able, but I understand if you'd prefer to make other arrangements. We'd provide a good reference, help you find placement at another station." He was giving me an out, a way to walk away from this whole mess without any professional consequences. "Can I think about it?" "Take all the time you need." And Webb, I'm sorry. I've been managing this station for 12 years, and I had no idea. None of us did. That was the thing about invisible poisons. They worked slowly, quietly, so gradually that by the time you noticed something was wrong, the damage was already done. I spent the afternoon walking around Nashville, revisiting the places I'd haunted when my band was still together. The dive bars on Lower Broadway where we'd played for tips and free beer. The recording studios on Music Row where we'd burned through our savings cutting a demo nobody wanted. The apartments in East Nashville where we'd crashed on couches and talked about making it big. All of it felt distant now, like looking at someone else's memories. The carbon monoxide had stolen 3 weeks of my life, but it had also revealed something I'd been avoiding. I didn't want to be in music anymore. Not performing, not recording, not even DJing overnight shifts for people who were too drunk or lonely to sleep. I wanted something quieter, something safer, something that wouldn't slowly poison me while I chased a dream that might not exist. That night, I called the station manager back and told him I was resigning. He argued half-heartedly, said I was making a decision while traumatized, but I could hear the relief in his voice. One less person to worry about. One less liability. Jimmy called an hour later. "Heard you quit." "Yeah. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. Maybe go back to school. Maybe leave Nashville entirely. You should stay. See this through. Make sure they actually fix the problem, not just seal it up and pretend it never happened. That's your job now. You're the one who's been here since the beginning." He was quiet for a moment. "You're right. I should have done this decades ago. Should have fought harder after Johnny died. Maybe if I had, you wouldn't have ended up in that booth." You saved my life, Jimmy. That's enough. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and searched for therapists in Nashville who specialized in trauma. Dr. Okonkwo had been right. I needed to talk to someone about what had happened, about the lost time, the recordings in my voice, the feeling that something had been using me while I slept. I found a practice near Belmont University and sent an email requesting an appointment. Then I closed my laptop and sat in the quiet of my apartment, listening to the sound of my own breathing. Clean air, clear thoughts, no voices singing songs I didn't know. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. 2 weeks after the building was evacuated, the Metro Health Department released their full report. I read it in my therapist's waiting room, skimming through pages of technical language about parts per million and exposure thresholds. The summary was damning. The isolation booth had maintained carbon monoxide levels between 200 and 400 parts per million whenever the HVAC system was running. Anything above 70 parts per million is considered immediately dangerous to life and health. Johnny Vance had spent 3 days in concentrations high enough to kill him slowly. I'd spent cumulative hours over 3 weeks breathing levels that caused permanent neurological damage in laboratory animals. Dr. Sarah Brennan, my therapist, called me into her office. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with an office decorated in calming blues and grays. Diplomas from Vanderbilt and UT Knoxville hung on the wall next to a poster about the signs of PTSD. "How are you doing with all the media attention?" she asked once I'd settled into the chair across from her desk. "I'm not paying attention to it. That's one strategy." She made a note on her tablet. "Have you experienced any more hallucinations? Lost time?" "No, my head feels clear now. Like waking up from a dream I didn't realize I was having." That's common with CO poisoning recovery. The brain fog lifts and suddenly you can see how impaired you were. She set the tablet aside. "I want to talk about something you mentioned in our last session. You said you felt guilty." "I do." "Why?" I thought about Eleanor Vance Patterson and her casserole, about Jimmy's decades of quiet guilt, about all the people who'd worked in that building and never knew why they felt sick. Because I figured it out and other people didn't. Because I survived and Johnny didn't. That's called survivor's guilt, and it's not rational. You didn't cause the leak. You didn't know about it any more than Johnny did. You were both victims of corporate negligence. But I got lucky. Jimmy found me in time. And that's something to be grateful for, not guilty about." She leaned forward. "Webb, from what you've told me, you spent weeks experiencing hallucinations, memory loss, and dissociative episodes. You recorded songs you don't remember singing. You made phone calls you don't remember making. That's traumatic, even if you understand the medical explanation." "I know." "Do you?" "Because you keep minimizing it, saying you're fine now, that you just need to move on. But trauma doesn't work that way. Your brain went through something abnormal and frightening. It's going to take time to process." After the session, I drove to Music Row. The station building was surrounded by chain-link fencing now, the windows covered with plywood. A sign advertised the demolition contractor. Sampson Brothers, Nashville's trusted demo experts since 1982. I parked across the street and watched workers in hard hats and respirators move in and out of the building. They'd started dismantling the basement level yesterday, according to Jimmy. The isolation booth was the first thing to go. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "Mr. Nichols? This is Detective Ramirez with Metro Police. Can we talk about your experience at the radio station? We're building a case." I called the number. A woman answered on the second ring. "Ramirez, this is Webb Nichols. You texted me? Thanks for calling back. I'm investigating potential criminal negligence related to the carbon monoxide leak. We've identified at least 17 former employees who experienced health issues while working in that building, going back to 1971. 3 deaths that may be connected. 3. Johnny Vance in 1974, Dale Whitmore in 1998, and a woman named Tracy Hollis in 2003. She died of a heart attack at 41. Her medical records show elevated carboxyhemoglobin levels that were never properly investigated. She paused. We're trying to establish a pattern of negligence, show that multiple ownership groups over the years ignored safety complaints and deferred maintenance. What do you need from me? Your testimony, medical records, any documentation you have about the phantom broadcasts or memory loss. We're building a timeline of when employees first noticed symptoms. I agreed to meet her the following week. After hanging up, I sat in my car and watched the demolition crew work. They'd brought in a small excavator that was tearing into the building's foundation, pulling out chunks of concrete and rebar. Each scoop of the bucket revealed more of the basement's interior. The old wiring, the rusted pipes, the decades of accumulated neglect. Jimmy pulled up beside me in his truck. He got out and leaned against my passenger door. Thought I might find you here. Couldn't stay away? Me neither. He watched the excavator work for a moment. They pulled out the isolation booth yesterday. The whole thing, walls, ceiling, acoustic foam, equipment. Loaded it onto a truck and took it to a hazardous waste facility in Rutherford County. Good. Found something interesting in the walls. Want to see? He pulled out his phone and showed me photos. Behind the acoustic foam, someone had written messages in pencil directly on the concrete walls. Dozens of them, layered over decades. Most were illegible, but a few stood out. My head won't stop spinning. 1972. I keep forgetting where I am. 1981. The microphone talks to me when I'm alone. 1995. I hear everyone who came before. No date. If you're reading this, get out. The air is poison. 1973. Someone had known. Almost immediately after the booth opened, someone had figured out the air was toxic and tried to warn people. But their message had been hidden behind foam, sealed away where nobody would see it. Fire Marshal thinks that last one was written by the original installation engineer, Jimmy said. Guy named Walter Parrish. He quit 2 weeks after the booth opened, citing health concerns. Studio management ignored him. Do we know what happened to him? Died in 1989. Lung cancer, officially. But his medical records show chronic respiratory issues starting in 1968. Jimmy put his phone away. System killed him slowly over 20 years. We watched the demolition in silence. A worker emerged from the building carrying a box of old recording equipment. Microphones, cables, mixing boards from the 70s. Everything contaminated with decades of carbon monoxide exposure. Station ownership is setting up a victim compensation fund, Jimmy said eventually. Lawyers are handling it. Anyone who worked in that building between 1968 and now can file a claim. They're also funding a mental health initiative for the Nashville music community. Free counseling, addiction support, that kind of thing. That's something. It's not enough, but it's a start. He turned to look at me. Eleanor Vance Patterson wants to create a memorial for Johnny and everyone else who was hurt by that booth. She's working with the Metro Arts Commission to get approval for a plaque on Music Row. What's it gonna say? Still working on the wording. Something about the importance of workplace safety in the music industry. Mental health awareness. Making sure Johnny's death means something. He paused. She wants you to speak at the dedication ceremony. I don't know what I'd say. You'd tell the truth. about what happened to you, about the recordings, about how the poison works. So people understand that mental health crises aren't always just mental. Sometimes there's a physical cause that nobody's looking for. The excavator hit something solid and stopped. The operator climbed down to investigate. Workers gathered around, pointing at something in the hole. One of them pulled out a phone and made a call. Jimmy's phone rang a moment later. He answered, listened, then hung up. They found more messages, written on the foundation itself, below the booth. From 1968, before the acoustic foam was installed. We got out of the car and walked to the fence. A site supervisor saw Jimmy and waved us over to a gate. "You'll want to see this, Mr. Briggs." We put on hard hats and respirators and walked into the excavated basement. The isolation booth was gone, leaving a square pit in the concrete floor. At the bottom, exposed by the excavator's bucket, was a section of foundation with words scratched into it. "This ventilation design is flawed. Do not use this booth until system is repaired. W. Parrish, lead engineer, March 1968. Walter Parrish had literally carved his warning into the foundation, the most permanent message he could leave. And they'd built the booth over it anyway, covered his warning with concrete and foam and equipment, and let people die. That's evidence," Detective Ramirez said from behind us. I hadn't heard her arrive. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that were cataloging everything in the pit. "That's proof they knew from day one and ignored it." She took photos from every angle while Jimmy and I stood at the edge of the excavation. 57 years. That warning had been hidden for 57 years, while people breathed poison and blamed themselves for feeling sick. "We're going to preserve this," she said, still photographing. "Make a casting of the inscription. This will be part of the memorial Eleanor is planning." The sun was setting behind the buildings on Music Row, casting long shadows across the demolition site. In a few weeks, this pit would be filled in, the foundation repaired, the building rebuilt with modern ventilation systems and safety protocols. The isolation booth would be gone, dismantled and disposed of like the hazard it was. But the messages would remain. Carved into concrete, written on walls, recorded on tapes. Evidence that people had tried to warn each other, tried to escape, tried to understand what was happening to them in that poisoned room. Jimmy put his hand on my shoulder. "Come on, they need to finish the demo work." We walked back to our cars as the last light faded from the sky. The workers were packing up for the night, securing the site, preparing for another day of tearing down what should have been destroyed decades ago. "You coming to the memorial dedication?" Jimmy asked. "When is it?" 3 weeks. They're fast-tracking the approval because of the media attention. He climbed into his truck. "Think about speaking. Your story matters, Webb. It's part of this history now." I drove home through the Nashville evening traffic, past the honky-tonks on Broadway and the recording studios on Music Row, and all the places where people came chasing dreams of musical fame. Some of them would make it, most wouldn't, and a few would end up like Johnny Vance, talented and doomed, killed by the very industry they loved. But now, at least, people would know why. Would understand that sometimes the danger isn't the rejection or the competition or the crushing weight of unfulfilled ambition. Sometimes it's just a cracked pipe in a basement leaking poison nobody can see. The memorial plaque sits on Music Row at the corner of 16th Avenue and Division Street, right where the afternoon sun hits it between the publishing houses and recording studios. Bronze with raised lettering, mounted on a piece of Tennessee limestone. Eleanor Vance Patterson chose the design herself. I stood in front of it on dedication day, reading the inscription for the 20th time. In memory of Johnny Vance, 1946 to 1974, and all those whose health was harmed by workplace negligence in the Nashville music industry. May their suffering lead to lasting change in safety standards and mental health awareness. If they won't listen to me alive, they'll have to hear me dead. Johnny's final words, which proved prophetic in ways he never imagined. About 50 people gathered for the ceremony. Former station employees, family members of victims, city officials, reporters. Jimmy stood beside Eleanor, both of them looking older than they had when this started. The investigation had taken its toll on everyone involved. Detective Ramirez had made her case. The district attorney was pursuing criminal negligence charges against 3 former station owners who'd ignored safety inspections and maintenance requests. The compensation fund had paid out over $2 million to victims and families, and Nashville's building codes had been updated to require annual carbon monoxide testing for all commercial properties. Eleanor asked me to speak. I'd spent days writing something meaningful, then thrown it all away and decided to just tell the truth. I never met Johnny Vance, I said, standing at a small podium they'd set up beside the plaque. But I heard his voice. Or I thought I did. The carbon monoxide poisoning made me hallucinate, made me lose time, made me do things I don't remember doing. For weeks, I believed the building was haunted, that Johnny's ghost was trying to communicate through old recording equipment. The crowd was silent, attentive. Eleanor nodded encouragingly. The real haunting wasn't supernatural. It was corporate negligence that spanned decades. It was warning signs that got ignored. It was people feeling sick and blaming themselves instead of questioning their environment. I paused, looking at the faces in the crowd. Johnny didn't die because he wasn't talented enough, or because the industry rejected him. He died because a studio valued profit over safety, because someone installed a broken ventilation system, and everyone who came after decided it was easier to seal a door than fix the problem. After the ceremony, people came up to share their own stories. A woman who'd worked at the station in 1988 and developed chronic migraines that disappeared after she quit. A man whose brother had been a session musician in the 70s and died young of heart failure. Each of them carrying pieces of the same story, finally understanding what had happened to them. Jimmy pulled me aside as the crowd dispersed. "You did good up there." I just told them what happened. Sometimes that's all people need to hear. The truth, without any decoration. He looked at the plaque. "Think this will actually change anything?" It already has. The building codes, the compensation fund, the safety inspections, that's change. I mean for you, personally. I thought about my last therapy session with Dr. Brennan, about how I'd stopped having nightmares about the isolation booth, about the job offer I'd received from a podcast production company in East Nashville. Daytime hours, modern building, proper ventilation, about how I could finally sleep through the night without hearing phantom broadcasts. "Yeah," I said. "I think it already has." The plaque would stay there on Music Row for decades, outlasting everyone who'd gathered for its dedication. A permanent reminder that sometimes the scariest things aren't ghosts or demons or supernatural forces. Sometimes they're just broken systems that nobody bothers to fix until people start dying. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you survive long enough to tell people what really happened in the dark.